Star Wars 7x7, episode 2546. Earlier this week, when we were talking about the Bad Batch and the familiar faces who have appeared so far in the first half of the season, I got to thinking about who else is going to be showing up potentially, and so I thought we would explore the possibilities there today. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So, with the first half of the Bad Batch season, what we have learned, among other things, is that the fine folks at Lucasfilm are not shying away from bringing in familiar faces to the show, right? They could be operating this in a way where the Bad Batch is just, far-flung and out into the middle of trouble and nowhere and not encountering characters that we've seen before. But nope, they are choosing to weave in characters with whom we are familiar on a pretty regular basis. I mean, the list, as we talked about on Monday, that's pretty long. So for today, basically, I looked at 4 categories of characters and who is basically active in the time of the Bad Batch series, and also characters that have appeared in Clone Wars storytelling, and so it seems likely that they might reappear, or in a couple of situations, characters that didn't necessarily appear in the Clone Wars, but who have appeared in other Star Wars storytelling who would be likely to appear on the Bad Batch series, or who could potentially, because they tie in to other Star Wars storytelling. And it seems like that's a reasonable way to go because of the fact that they brought Fennec Shand in to the Bad Batch, and she obviously came from the Mandalorian series and is going to be in the Book of Boba Fett, so certainly they're looking for those opportunities. So as far as, say, the Jedi go, and I'm stretching it a little bit as you'll see in a moment, there are of course some Jedi that survived Order 66, and so there's a pretty good chance that they are going to stumble across some of them. Caleb Doom has already appeared in the series, and there's no reason they can't stumble across him again. Also possibly surviving, but we don't know for sure, is Quinlan Vos, the Maverick Jedi, who has a very fun fan base and who possibly survived Order 66. We don't know for sure. We know that he survived through the end of the Dark Disciple series of story arcs with that novel Dark Disciple by Christy Golden that adapted those 2 4-episode story arcs. So he could be kicking around out there as well. And since we've already been to Braca, the possibility of Sir Junda, if I'm pronouncing that right, and Cal Kestis, the Jedi who appeared in Jedi Fallen Order, right? That's, kind of a likely possibility. Also, Ahsoka Tano, right? I mean, can't forget Ahsoka, and this is where I said I'm stretching the Jedi thing, because she's not really a Jedi. She's just, an unaffiliated Force user, basically. And Grogu. Why not Grogu? Grogu survived somehow, so wouldn't it be fascinating to have a little wink and a nod to Grogu show up in the Bad Batch somehow? That would be pretty amazing. I've grouped the second set of characters under the category Rebels, and this one's a little bit trickier to define because, as we know from at least Solo: A Star Wars Story, or at least this is Enfys Nest's perception, the rebellion is sort of starting to form, like some sort of spark is happening in between, roughly, like directly in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, right? So we know that Rex and Trace and Rafa Martez are working together and fighting for the Galactic Republic, as it were, and so some nascent thing is happening. And it isn't until the Star Wars Rebels series where various cells are starting to patch themselves together to become the Alliance to restore the Republic, or the Rebel Alliance, if you will. But there are people like Bail Organa and Mon Mothma who are kicking around and haven't yet appeared, but certainly seems like it's a possibility, and they're still active in the Senate as well. So even if we have scenes on Coruscant that talk about more global politics situations, more galactic politics situations, then it's entirely likely that we'll see the 2 of them and maybe start to hear a little bit about the seeds of their participation and development of an alliance to restore the Republic. There's also, of course, Saw Gerrera, who has appeared so far, and so, again, they've shown an indication that they are willing to go that route. And with the fact that there's an episode coming up called Rescue on Ryloth, as I mentioned in that episode on Monday, Cham Syndulla possibly, and, whether we see a young Hera potentially, that's certainly on the table. I mean, so is a young Enfys Nest for that matter, I guess. Oh, and I also wondered about Wolf and Gregor too. So those are the other two clones that we meet with Rex in the Star Wars Rebels series, and so it makes you wonder when Wolf and Gregor hooked up with Rex, or if they're already hanging out together. So there's that too. Third category of folks are grouped under the general scoundrel header, but mostly bounty hunters. The notion of Omega and the deterioration of the Jango Fett template made me wonder whether Boba Fett could possibly get involved in this whole situation. It would certainly be of interest to the Kaminoans to grab Boba Fett again if they could, because he is an unaltered clone, so in theory he is an exact duplicate of Jango Fett, and if they can get genetic material from Boba Fett, they would be able to restore that whole genetic line if they wanted to do that. And Boba Fett has from time to time partnered with the likes of Aura Singh and Bosk, and so that's possibly up in the cards. Also, a couple of characters that are lesser known comparatively, but have shown up in other media like Embo and Sugi, and those are bounty hunters who showed up in the Aftermath trilogy of novels by Chuck Wendig. So in addition to being in the Clone Wars, and they obviously have survived that long if they made it to Chuck Wendig's novels. So yeah, other possibilities there. And then the prime scoundrel to suggest is Hondo Onaka, who obviously is still operating at his particularly scoundrel best in this time period too. And considering how many different capers he ends up involved in, I mean, yeah, there's every reason to think he's going to show up somewhere in this series. And then the last group of folks, I thought it would be fascinating to consider the possibility of Mandalorians showing up. And the Boba Fett thought is what kind of sparked it for me. But the notion of Bo-Katan or Gar Saxon or Rook Kast or Ursa Wren, which then also opens up the possibility of a young Sabine Wren being in here as well for some sort of guest spot. And I guess if we're talking about Bo-Katan showing up in here, then her two compatriots that are with her in The Mandalorian, which would be Casca Reeves and Axe Woves, right? They could end up showing up on this too. And again, just the proclivity of the storytelling team to bring some of these characters in from other media and have them, now they're in this, now they're in that, now they're in the other, right? Like it seems like that's the kind of thing that they like to do, that they like to play with. And so yeah, those are my top characters across 4 different categories to flag as very likely, or better than even odds, to show up at some point in the Bad Batch. And I'd love to know what yours are too. So by all means, chime in wherever you catch this podcast, on a place that has comments on social media channels, or at home base at sw7x7.com. I'd love to know what you think. And that is going to do it for this episode of the show. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.